This is A Different Brilliant, an Aspect podcast focusing on the strengths, interests and aspirations of the autistic community. Open, authentic and engaging conversations about autism. Made for autistic people, parents and carers of children on the autism spectrum. Welcome to A Different Brilliant.
Welcome everyone to A Different Brilliant. I am your host, Madeleine Jaine Lobsey, and I am an autistic ADHD adult. I parent autistic ADHD kids and I work in the sector. So I don't know, I like to say I'm a bit of a neurodivergent nerd. And I'm joined today by two guests. We have Natalie Phillips-Mason. And Natalie is a neuro-inclusion ally, I love that word, a change management practitioner and a member of a mixed neurotype family. With nearly 30 years of change management experience, she's the founder and lead consultant of Inclusive Change, a consultancy that focuses on education, consulting and research to enhance employee and customer experiences. Inclusive Change recently published research into Australian neurodivergent shopping experiences and is now working with precinct developers and well-known retail brands to actually apply those findings. So this is a very exciting conversation because we're also joined by Lisa Whinnen, who has over 17 years experience in the property sector. So Stockland is one of the largest retail organisations in Australia, and Lisa is a social sustainability manager, partnerships and engagement, and she held that for the last 3 years, in that role. And she's managed national partnerships and volunteering initiatives with a focus on capability and capacity building for partners and employees, and has experience in community engagement and investment reporting. So Lisa was the subject matter expert on disability enterprise-wide and advised on and created initiatives such as sensory maps and hidden disability sunflower initiatives in all retail town centres. That just makes me cry for starters. It's just so moving. And Lisa has extensive experience and understanding of not-for-profits with a deep focus and passion on diversity, equity and inclusion. Her experience in disability extends to her previous role as inclusive play manager. Oh, that's a question. At Variety, the children's charity. And in the short term, Lisa will be using her experience to consult and assist organisations on all things social sustainability and diversity, equity and inclusion. How cool is that? And then to add on top of all of that, both Natalie and Lisa are proud parents of neurodivergent children.
Yes.
Welcome. That was a lot of words about some great women. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you very much.
So today's topic, I think it's so much part of everyday life, and we're about to deep dive into something that people will either have really consciously thought about before or maybe not. They've just had a lot of experience in it. And what we're going to talk about is creating an inclusive retail experience for autistic shoppers. Man. I feel like we need to go and have a glass of wine.
I know.
Because there's a lot, isn't there, about that.
I
feel like there's these pregnant pauses at the moment, and we're like, there is so much we could talk about,
start?
I think so.
There's a world in the pause, isn't there?
Yeah.
We'll maybe say something about your background and then your work related to Autism Friendly.
Sure. I actually had a very similar journey to Natalie in that I've always been in corporate, in finance, in property, was working as an executive assistant to C-suite leadership teams. So saw things from that angle, I guess, all the while dealing at home with an autistic child who was diagnosed at 4. And just feeling very frustrated at the disconnect. I then was tasked with rolling out sensory maps in partnership with Autism Friendly, and the team there love the Aspect team. I'm totally biased, but oh my gosh, the learnings were incredible. And I would walk the shopping centres with Matt and Emma to really understand, particularly from Emma Gallagher's perspective, what I might have found a little bit annoying, she found unbearable. Like the physicality of that sensory input, I didn't fully appreciate. And it helped me as a parent because I had no idea that that's what my son was going through, all those times where I had to drop trolleys, get my child out because there was full-blown meltdown and there wasn't a quiet room. There wasn't, areas where I could go and help my son reset. So that was an incredible experience and something that I think will stay with me for a very long time. And was recognised internally. We won an innovation award for that. We were the first property company in Australia to roll out sensory maps. And it was tricky and it was challenging because we had to adapt it and set it up for success. We've since rolled out Sunflower, hidden disability Sunflower lanyards with much success. And there's still room for more. And I think the beauty and having just left Stockland, I leave very proud that there is an embedded understanding now or a curiosity that if we're going to design for all people, you have to actually go out and speak to all people. You must speak to people with disability. You must get that input and understanding. It's now non-negotiable.
That's a really big deal. And I want to move on to everybody listening has probably had one of those experiences that you've talked about, the dropping trolley and gotta go moments. So, more and more places like Stockland and many other places are beginning to have things like quiet hours, and sometimes quiet spaces, but quiet hours. And it's definitely seen as a step forward. Something's happening and it's an inclusive moment in our society. But I know both of you have a view that is only a small step. And can you explain, I guess, what are the additional measures that you think should be taken?
With respect to quiet hour, the fact is that quiet hour is a number of years old now. And I personally think there is so much else that retailers could be doing without necessarily going to a quiet hour, because I actually don't think quiet hour is the solution for many retailers. It might not be at all aligned with their brand or their community. So I think it's only one option. I am a fan of the hidden disability Sunflower, but conducting a sensory audit first and foremost, for example, if you have a store with a large footprint, is not something that is hugely expensive to invest in.
So we have no idea what you're talking about. What's a sensory audit?
So a sensory audit is having someone from within, for example, the autistic community come in and go through the store, as Lisa talked about, and tell the organisation, tell someone from within the operations team or wherever you come from what it is to experience the sensory environment within that particular store. So that audit will give you the lived experience of someone who has some sensory sensitivities and will give you an idea of what you could do differently. Then you've got, having a gender inclusive bathroom. Yep. Something as simple as that, making sure that if you've got hair dryers that they're quiet. There are there are dozens and dozens and dozens of practices, but the first and most important thing is to get an education and to understand what neuro-inclusive practice actually is and what it isn't. Because what I think where the risk is at the moment is in the assumptions. And the assumption is that to do something neuro-inclusive, it's going to cost you a lot of money, it's going to cost you a lot of time, and it's too hard. And that's what we're trying to break. Yeah. Is that there are so many other opportunities there. And simply to have an education where your staff recognise if somebody's got their headphones on in store, maybe they don't want to be interrupted. Maybe they don't want to be approached. Maybe, allowing people to have a shopping experience where they can control their own environment to a certain extent, but where if you've got multiple complex noises going on, and you've got video screens, and you've got crowds, and you've got lights, and you've got other things going on.
And then 5 questions. Would you like this? Would you like that? Would you like
and
this?
then
Would you
5
like that? Yep.
Exactly right. So what are the social interaction components? So putting that all together can result in an environment from a retail perspective that is really non-inclusive and not welcoming for a lot of people.
And I think too, it's a case of, interacting with your customers when they're ready, and asking the questions. I often, I've been asked many times, can you give me instructions on how I should speak to autistic people? And I'm like, what? No, speak to them. Ask them questions. They are humans. And really breaking down that barrier, it actually really grates on me when I'm approached and asked about that, because ultimately they're your customer. And I think I saw a study, you might know, Nat, like $40 billion or something like that is lost in the Australian retail market, lost sales from people with disability because they are not catered for.
Yeah. That's $40 billion you could spend on your inclusive training.
Exactly.
Well, there is a very strong commercial imperative for retailers to be taking this seriously.
Yeah, well, let's now talk a little bit about personal experience. So, Lisa, with your child, autistic child, can you just say a little bit about your personal experience and challenges in engaging in retail places?
Yeah. I mean, I even think back to, trying to take my child to the toilet. And when he was older, he's now nearly 14, I will still want to go and be near him while he uses a bathroom. So exactly what you were saying, Nat, gender neutral bathrooms are critical for me. I actually won't go to a centre if I know that those supports aren't there.
Right.
It's just not worth my while. It has to have a quiet room for me. It has to have those supports in place that I know he's going to be comfortable. And we will plot out our journey. We always go onto websites. My son likes to look at pictures, understand the environment he's going into. Visual stories are really key. I love them still. I've been using them for many years with my child. It's those simple things that set him up for success. He loves shopping. He's at an age where he wants to, go and buy new clothes and he's noticing himself.
Well, it's very social too.
Yes.
Like at that age in particular, kids go to the shopping centre after school to hang out.
Absolutely. So to me, it's a missed opportunity if you're not catering for that. Yeah, that's obviously it's now ingrained in me, but whenever I'm at any shopping centre, I am looking at all of those inputs and, I genuinely see them as missed opportunities. They, big shopping centres have capital budgets and expenditure that they will upgrade their bathrooms. So no, why not include a quiet room? Why not include a gender neutral bathroom? It just makes good business sense.
Yeah. So Natalie, maybe now as a parent of someone who is neurodivergent, let's now talk about the hopes you have for a future of inclusivity in retail spaces.
Yeah. So my hope is to give people greater choice. It's really that simple because that's what this is about. This is about choice. And the same way that we talk about choice in the workplace, allowing people to shop how, when and where with greater choice, because that's where I think the opportunity is. I think there's a real opportunity in this country for retail brands to lead the way by not just reducing the barriers, but actually creating greater joy. We don't talk about that enough, but the concept of sensory joy and sensory glimmers, is something that is so not talked about, and I would love to see more of that.
I just got excited.
I know.
Imagine that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's there, right? We just got to know, we've just got to recognise that it's there and really bring it to the fore. And I think what I really want to see is that recognition where employee diversity is actually a reflection of customer diversity. Yes. And, you know, in the research that we've done, we've really honed in on some of these areas. And what we know is that, so we didn't just look at barriers, we looked at choice drivers. And both our neurotypical and our neurodivergent shoppers told us they want to see diversity in stores that reflects diversity of community. And the
so
other
just
really...
to say that super simply, that if you go to the shops, you want to see people like you.
Yep.
Yeah.
People, community that you recognise, community that you can relate to.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And the other really big space, I think, is in when it comes to school and school support, because I think what we know about back to school is it's something that happens every year. We know that to Lisa's
the campaign, the back to school campaign sale.
The campaign is actually a trade event. It's a trade event, right? So children go to school every year. Parents will shop for their children every year. But what we also need to recognise is there is many children who are not going to mainstream schooling. We have a huge school can't, you know, issue. But everybody loves to be able to purchase back to school items, whether they're studying at home and homeschooling or going into a school environment, you know, and this is an area where I think we're really under indexed in, because for parents of neurodivergent children who want to be able to walk in and buy school items or fill a school list or whatever it is that you need to do, you know, there are so many more parents who don't necessarily have that choice, and their children don't necessarily have the same experience. So I think back to school is a really important one. So
that's so good, because I mean, two things I want to say about that. One is I have absolutely spent more money on school shoes because I went to a place that does special sensory sessions for autistic kids to try on shoes. And I've hands down just spent more money because it was so good.
I've done the same.
Right? There's that. But I just thought about everything you just said, Nat. If we're talking about a community that it makes a difference to have visual stories, it makes a difference to know what's going to happen, you know, all of those things. And then we've got school can't, right? And a big issue with that. If people could go to the shops and choose their books and choose their stationery and like be participating in the setup of their school year, that's so much bigger than just the commercial opportunity and the difference it would make to those people, those families.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
So good, Nat. So good. I'm like team shopping joy, autistic joy at retail.
I've seen, when we did the sensory audits, I've seen Emma Gallagher from Aspect be mesmerised, and she called it the glimmer. So I know that paraphrasing, with some artwork. And that she said it helped her to reset. It helped her to just center herself and continue. It was just that little moment. So I am so for all the glimmers. It's joy.
Oh, that's so good. You know, I'm sensory seeking. So when I go into a shop, I've done it my whole life. I just didn't know that I was doing it. I have to feel the fabric of everything. Like I go into a shop and I'm going, am I going to buy that? Am I going to buy that? I'm like touching everything.
Yep.
And I remember as a kid going, don't touch anything. So I had this dilemma the whole time but the joy for me in shopping is feeling things. Literally.
Yep.
And I'm also like, don't be naughty. And I still live with that as an adult.
Yeah, we all do, don't we? We're like, but I want to touch.
But it's a really important point, because I get asked a lot, why did you focus on physical retail and not online? And it's because of exactly what you've just described. You can't necessarily fulfill your shopping requirements if you're online only, because if you do need to feel a fabric, or it's exactly the same point as to what's prompted me to do the research and get the data, there is a real important role that physical stores play for everybody in terms of the shopping experience. So, you know, that is something we hear time and time again.
Yeah, and on a much broader perspective is the thing we've only touched on, which is the massive social opportunity that retail centres are. They are community places. They're places people meet. They go together. They shop together. It's about relationship.
Absolutely. And this is the point in really building up that education and that training within centre staff, retailers, customers. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. You can't unlearn that. So I genuinely feel like we're on that journey now to understanding that we want to make places for everybody, and there is that shift. We're not there yet, but it is shifting.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I was just thinking maybe you've got an example of, employment training or employer training where they have been educated. Like you said, the basic is get people educated. What kind of difference does it make in the culture of an organisation when the employees do receive that kind of education?
So I think I think it makes a huge difference, and I think it is where we have to start. And what I often talk to my clients about is you don't need to be a neuroscientist to understand neuroinclusion. You just need to be a human being.
Yeah.
And I think the fact of the matter is that, the more we start talking more openly about non-apparent differences and non-apparent disability, the more people will feel comfortable to share their lived experience. And it happens all the time, because this is about, hearts and minds as well. It's about getting people to think differently. It's about unlearning all the socializing that we've had as a neuromajority for so long around difference. And so for me, this is very much about normalizing differences and actually each of us reflecting on our own unconscious bias, which is a massive part of where some of our behaviours and assumptions and beliefs come from. So there are some really founding principles in it. But to the points that have already been raised in today's conversation, when we apply universal neuroinclusive principles, everybody benefits. Everybody.
Well, if we were going to wrap it up, this is about education. This is about choice. And now I'm adding to the list, this is about shopping joy, autistic sensory shopping joy.
Yes. It is possible.
It's totally possible, and I'm all in. I think many people would be.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much for your time and your expertise, and mostly your heart in this matter. And we really appreciate you having this conversation today.
Absolute pleasure.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Well, hold tight, everybody. Do not go anywhere. In something a little different for this podcast, we decided to bring in another guest so that we could really have the autistic experience of shopping centres and of retails. I'm joined by Alexandra, and she is the receptionist at Autism Spectrum Australia, Aspect, and also on their think tank, which does a variety of projects throughout Aspect, and is a fabulous, I got to say, sensational human being who happens to be also an autistic adult. Hi, Alexandra.
Hi, Maddie.
So I thought it would be really good for people to hear autistic perspective about retail centres. I know there's lots of people listening that will have their own experience, but I thought it would be good to say, what is it like as an autistic person going into particularly those bigger shopping centres?
I would say that there are positives and negatives about walking into a shopping centre. Especially as an autistic person, because a lot of people on the spectrum have a wide variety of sensory needs, such as, from experience, as I've got friends who are also on the spectrum, they are very aware of their surroundings and are very precautious in such an environment, whether it be using hand sanitizer or just sticking to places that they know and are comfortable in visiting within a shopping centre. I actually tend to go to the shopping centre on my own.
Right.
And I've got a number of local shopping centres within my area that I frequent quite a bit, again, because I'm comfortable in visiting those venues, but also I know that the shops that I need to go to are within those precincts.
Yeah, what about it makes it comfortable for you?
I think just repetition.
Right.
With one in particular that's in my local area, I can hit at least 5 of my favourite shops in one go.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you find that you like to go to the shops just to go looking, or do you only go when you've got a specific task or something you need to do?
I'm only human, Maddie, and so I do both. I do both. These days I tend to do mostly grocery shopping.
Yeah.
And because I am a photographer by hobby as well as like to make gifts for family, I usually go to places like the Reject Shop or Coles or Spotlight, for example.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But no, I tend to do both because now that I've recently moved out of home again, I obviously need to fill my little abode with things that I like.
Yeah.
So knowing where to go is very handy for me.
Yeah. And has there ever been a time in your life where it just wasn't, like there was something about the way someone interacted with you that just really didn't work?
Well, I tend to wear the hidden sunflower lanyard when I'm out and about, and I get mixed reactions to that, which is fine. You know, it's a program that's slowly making an impact, which is fabulous. But to get the kind of looks like, why are you wearing a lanyard like that? You don't look like you've got a disability. I'm like, well, that's exactly the point of the lanyard.
Yep.
And now that Westfield have come on board with the scheme is really good because the customer service that you receive once people are aware of the lanyard can be a positive, but it also can be a negative.
Yeah.
Because, yes, we're members of the general public and, yes, we're wearing a lanyard for a medical reason, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we should be or need to be treated any differently than anyone else.
Oh, man, Alexandra.
I think that's where the hesitation and the lack of education lies in many situations when it comes to retail.
Yeah, I mean, you've just absolutely nailed it on the head, I think. And, you know, I love what you said about, you know, that people are beginning to get on board with this, and there's, I guess, various levels of training and understanding depending on who you interact with. And I also love the thing you said about we don't necessarily need to be treated any differently.
No, we're just like everybody else, and we just happen to have a hidden disability that needs a lot more education and awareness within the our extended Australian community.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this then. If you could like wave a wand, you know, and got a magic wish about how shopping centres or a retail experience would be for the autistic community, is there anything that you would wish?
There is one thing, and it may sound really petty, but I would love for the shopping centres to be the place where the hidden disability sunflower scheme actually has their own lane like they do at airports.
Yeah.
That would be fabulous.
You mean like in a grocery store, in a checkout? You mean like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, well, for example, one of our major supermarkets does a quiet hour.
Yeah.
For those of us I would assume for those of us on the spectrum, I haven't really looked into it, to be honest, Maddie.
Yeah.
But I think that's fabulous. So why not do something like that or something similar to that with the Hidden Sunflower?
Well, Alexandra, honestly, there's a reason why people love you so much. You are so ridiculously delightful, and we appreciate all of your comments.
Thank you, Madeleine, for the opportunity.
Thanks for listening to A Different Brilliant, an Aspect podcast focusing on the strengths, interests and aspirations of the autistic community. If you would like to learn more, visit our website, aspect.org.au, to listen to past episodes or send us a message. Make sure to like or subscribe to A Different Brilliant on your podcast app.